For decades, professional wrestling in America wasn't a single kingdom, but a patchwork of powerful regional empires. Each territory was its own little world, with its own promoter, its own stars, and its own unique flavor of wrestling. They were all loosely held together by a governing body, the National Wrestling Alliance, or NWA. The whole system was built on a gentleman's agreement. Promoters didn't step on each other's turf, creating a stable, profitable, and fiercely loyal ecosystem. Down in the South, one man had built the most powerful of these empires. His name was Ole Anderson, and his Georgia Championship Wrestling was a gritty, authentic Southern dynasty. Thanks to the new world of cable television, it had become a national threat. But in a single 24-hour period, a stunning betrayal by a young, ambitious promoter from New York named Vince McMahon would bring that empire to its knees. It set in motion a war that would change wrestling forever. This is the story of Black Saturday. To understand what was lost, you have to understand what Ole Anderson built. And it was special. Before the 1980s, wrestling was all about the territories. You had promotions in Florida, the Mid-Atlantic, Texas, and beyond, and each one had its own distinct identity. The NWA, formed in 1948, was the glue. It was a board of promoters who collectively recognized a single world heavyweight champion. This champion would travel from territory to territory, defending the title and creating dream matchups. It was a system that made them work together while also fueling intense regional competition. At the heart of all this, in the late 70s and early 80s, was Georgia Championship Wrestling. GCW wasn't just some local promotion, it was an institution. In 1972, a visionary media mogul named Ted Turner bought the rights to air GCW on his Atlanta-based station, WTCG. A few years later, that station became SuperStation, WTBS, beamed into homes all across the country. Suddenly, Georgia wrestling wasn't just for Georgia anymore. It was the first NWA territory to get a national cable TV contract, and its flagship show, airing every Saturday at 6:05 p.m., became the most-watched program on Turner's entire network. The architect of this success was Alan Rogowski, better known to the world as Ole Anderson. Ole was old-school wrestling personified. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't a cartoon character. He was a rugged, no-nonsense brawler, one half of the legendary and legitimately feared tag team, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew. He and his kayfabe brother Gene were known for their brutal, realistic style. They would methodically dissect opponents, creating a believable sense of danger that fans absolutely craved. In 1976, Ole became the head booker for Georgia Championship Wrestling and later a part owner. His philosophy was simple: wrestling should feel real. He focused on psychology, long-term stories, and heated rivalries that felt personal. There were no over-the-top gimmicks, just blood, sweat, and Southern-style grit. It was wrestling, not sports entertainment. The voice of this empire was the legendary announcer Gordon Solie, whose serious, credible commentary gave the whole show an air of legitimacy that no one else could touch. Under Ole's creative control, GCW became a powerhouse. He turned guys like Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes into huge stars. The show's mix of GCW talent and stars from Jim Crockett's Mid-Atlantic territory created a weekly supercard that was appointment television. That Saturday night time slot on TBS wasn't just a TV show, it was a cultural phenomenon that pulled in massive ratings and made GCW a very profitable business. It seems like Ole Anderson's Southern Empire was unstoppable, a fortress of traditional wrestling built brick by brick on a foundation of authenticity. But a storm was gathering up north, and it was about to wash everything away. While Ole Anderson was perfecting his brand of Southern grappling, a revolution was brewing in the Northeast. In 1982, Vincent Kennedy McMahon bought the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, or WWF, from his father, Vincent J. McMahon. The elder McMahon was a traditionalist, a respected member of the NWA who played by the territory rules. His son was different. Vince Jr. didn't see wrestling as a regional sport. He saw it as global entertainment. His vision had no room for the NWA's gentleman's agreement. He wanted to shatter the mold, to swallow up the fragmented wrestling landscape into one singular empire, with his newly rebranded WWF at the very top. He wasn't interested in wrestling. He was creating sports entertainment, a world of larger-than-life superheroes and villains, cartoonish gimmicks, and a theatrical, entertainment-first approach. It was the exact opposite of what Ole Anderson was doing in Georgia. The first shots were fired in 1983. McMahon formally split the WWF from the NWA and launched his aggressive national expansion. He started running shows in rival promoters' backyards and, in the ultimate act of war, began poaching their top talent. He famously lured Hulk Hogan away from the AWA, a move that would become the cornerstone of his global conquest. The NWA's old guard was furious. At the 1983 NWA convention, Ole Anderson publicly threatened Vince, declaring that if the WWF invaded their territories, he would retaliate by running shows in the WWF's home turf of Pennsylvania. The battle lines were drawn. But while Ole was preparing for a ground war, Vince McMahon was planning an airstrike. McMahon knew that to truly own the country, he needed more television. He already had a deal with the USA Network, but the biggest prize in wrestling broadcasting was the 6:05 p.m. Saturday slot on Ted Turner's SuperStation, WTBS. It was the most watched wrestling show in the nation, a direct pipeline into millions of homes, especially in the southern markets the WWF hadn't conquered yet. Vince went straight to Ted Turner, hoping to buy the time slot. Turner said no. He liked the traditional, action-focused studio wrestling that GCW gave him. He wasn't a fan of McMahon's slick, New York style and turned him down flat. For most people, that would have been the end of it. But Vince McMahon wasn't most people. Rejection just meant he had to find another way in. He decided to go through the back door. And that door led right to a group of men who were getting very tired of Ole Anderson. Ole Anderson was a brilliant booker, but he was also famously difficult. His gruff, no-nonsense personality had made him as many enemies as fans. Among those who had grown frustrated with him were his own business partners in Georgia Championship Wrestling, the legendary wrestling brothers Jack and Gerald Briscoe, and another promoter named Jim Barnett. Reports from the time suggest that Ole's abrasive management style and fights over money had created deep cracks in the company's ownership. He was squeezing his partners out, and they were looking for a way to get even. Vince McMahon saw his chance. Unable to buy the time slot from Turner, he secretly approached the Briscoes and Barnett. His offer? To buy their controlling shares in Georgia Championship Wrestling itself. The deal was done behind closed doors, without Ole Anderson having a clue. For around $900,000 to $1 million, Jack and Gerald Briscoe, along with Jim Barnett, sold their majority stake in GCW to their biggest rival. The sale gave McMahon exactly what he wanted. Not just the company, but its priceless television slot on TBS. Ole Anderson, the man who built the empire, was now a powerless minority shareholder, left completely in the dark. The last authentic Georgia Championship Wrestling broadcast aired on July 7, 1984. It was business as usual, and the fans at home had no idea it was the end of an era. 1 week later, on Saturday, July 14, 1984, wrestling fans across America tuned in to TBS at 6:05 p.m., expecting to see their favorite GCW stars and hear the familiar voice of Gordon Solie. Instead, they were greeted by the sight of Vince McMahon himself, sitting in the TBS studios. In a now infamous moment, WWF announcer Freddie Miller introduced McMahon, who calmly announced that the WWF had taken over and promised an even better brand of wrestling. What followed was a culture shock of epic proportions. The gritty in-ring action filmed in a small Atlanta studio was gone. In its place was a slickly produced highlight show, featuring pre-taped matches from the WWF's massive arena shows in places like Madison Square Garden. Southern fans, used to the believable, athletic style of wrestlers like Ole, the Briscoes, and Dusty Rhodes, were now watching the cartoonish, over-the-top characters of the WWF. It was Hulk Hogan, Big John Studd, and a style that felt totally alien. The backlash was immediate and overwhelming. Viewers were outraged. They felt betrayed. This wasn't their wrestling. This was a northern invasion. The phone lines at TBS were flooded with thousands of angry calls demanding the return of GCW. The ratings, which had been massive for GCW, plummeted. The day would forever be known to wrestling fans as Black Saturday. In a telling encounter, Vince McMahon and his wife Linda reportedly approached Ole Anderson at the TBS studios, offering friendship and a job. Ole, furious at the destruction of the territory system he loved, responded with an unprintable tirade, telling them exactly what they could do with their offer. He would later say, "When Vince McMahon offered me more money than I ever believed possible, I told him to go fuck himself. I thought he was full of shit." He chose pride over a paycheck, a decision that would define the rest of his career. Vince had won the battle for the time slot, but the war for the hearts of Southern fans was a total disaster. Vince McMahon's takeover of the TBS slot was a genius move on paper, but a complete catastrophe in practice. He had fundamentally misunderstood his new audience. Southern fans didn't want a clip show of matches from New York. They wanted their live, studio-based wrestling. Ted Turner was just as furious. He felt McMahon had broken a promise to produce original programming from the Atlanta studios, delivering a low-effort highlight reel instead. As the WWF's ratings on TBS continued to tank, Turner fought back. He started offering airtime to other promotions that still had the style his audience craved. He gave a Sunday slot to Bill Watts's popular Mid-South Wrestling and, in a direct shot at McMahon, gave a Saturday morning slot to a brand new promotion started by none other than Ole Anderson himself. After being forced out, Ole didn't just give up. He started Championship Wrestling from Georgia, an explicit continuation of the GCW style. In a shocking turn of events, Ole's new, smaller promotion airing on Saturday mornings began to draw better ratings than McMahon's flagship WWF show. The fans had spoken. They wanted Ole's wrestling. The pressure was mounting on McMahon. He was losing money, his show was a ratings disaster, and he had angered one of the most powerful men in media. Finally, after less than a year, Vince McMahon admitted defeat. In March of 1985, he sold the coveted Saturday night time slot for $1 million to Jim Crockett Jr., the promoter of the Mid-Atlantic Territory and the NWA's new standard-bearer. This single deal had enormous consequences. With that $1 million in cash from Crockett, McMahon had the capital he needed to fund his biggest gamble yet, the very first WrestleMania, which took place just after he sold the time slot. You could argue that Jim Crockett essentially bankrolled the event that would cement the WWF's national dominance. Meanwhile, Jim Crockett Promotions took over the TBS slot, bringing NWA wrestling back to Saturday nights. This national platform allowed Crockett to consolidate power and buy up other dying territories in an attempt to build a national promotion to truly compete with the WWF. A few years later, when Crockett's company ran into financial trouble, Ted Turner bought the promotion to keep wrestling on his network. He renamed it after its flagship show, World Championship Wrestling, or WCW. In his attempt to kill the territories and create a monopoly, Vince McMahon had accidentally created his greatest and most powerful rival. The Black Saturday incident, while a short-term failure for Vince, was the fatal blow to the territory system. It proved the old gentleman's agreements were dead and accelerated the collapse of the NWA. The world of regional wrestling empires was over. For Ole Anderson, it was the ultimate betrayal. His life's work was torn down overnight by corporate greed and backstabbing partners. He would continue to work in wrestling, even as a booker for the early WCW and as a founding member of the Four Horsemen, but the bitterness never really left him. His feud with Vince McMahon was so intense that he was conspicuously absent when the Four Horsemen were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2012. As Ole himself put it, "Vince McMahon hates my guts, and I don't like him, so that's all there is to it." The story of Black Saturday is more than just a business deal. It was a cultural flashpoint that marked the end of one era of professional wrestling and the violent birth of another. It was the day a kingdom of regional empires fell to a single national aggressor. If you enjoyed this look back at wrestling history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that shaped the sport. The legacy of Black Saturday is complicated. It was a hostile takeover that destroyed a beloved institution, but also paved the way for the Monday Night Wars and the wrestling boom of the 90s. It was the death of wrestling and the birth of sports entertainment. It changed everything. So, you have to ask, was it an act of ruthless betrayal that ruined wrestling? Or was it just the painful but necessary evolution of the business? Let us know what you think in the comments below.